When mentioning Ban Zhao, many people may only recall the idiom throwing aside the brush with composure. Textbooks usually only give a brief mention of his deeds. Yet when one truly reads through his biography, it is astonishing to discover that he was practically a legendary hero in real life. Ban Zhao was the very model of a comeback. He only began his military career at the age of 40, yet in his very first battle he forced the Xiongnu King Huyan to flee in defeat. Soon after, he set out to the western regions with only 36 men, but one after another he accomplished incredible feats. He pacified Shanshan, brought Khotan's Guangde into submission, and within only a few years controlled the military and political power of more than a dozen states, becoming the de facto ruler of the western regions. When facing the counterattack of a coalition whose combined forces vastly outnumbered his own, he did not wait for reinforcements from Eastern Han. Instead, relying on courage and strategy, he formed alliances among the states, and many times won battles with fewer soldiers against greater numbers, leading his men to carve out a bloody path. Especially when facing the mightiest power of the western regions, the Dakushans, he used 20,000 mixed troops to suppress 70,000 elite soldiers, ultimately forcing the enemy general to surrender. Ban Zhao fought in the western regions for 22 years without ever suffering defeat. By his own strength, he intimidated more than 50 states into submission to the Eastern Han. His record of achievements was truly epic. If history were to select a man closest to the figure of a superhero, it would certainly include Ban Zhao. Today, Dalang will share the story of this fiercest man of the Eastern Han, Ban Zhao. Ban Zhao was born in the year 32 into a typical family of historians. His father, Ban Biao, was a renowned historian who had written a continuation of the records of the Grand Historian. His elder brother Ban Gu and younger sister Ban Zhao were also great masters of historiography. Together, the three completed the monumental work Book of Han, which has been praised throughout later generations. However, Ban Zhao did not fit in with this scholarly family. Though well versed in the classics and knowledgeable of historical allusions, he had no interest in writing or historical commentary. Instead, he was captivated by military strategy, war horses, and the clash of arms. In his heart, he planted early a dream that one day he might, like Zhang Qian, venture into the western regions and make great achievements. Yet at that time, Eastern Han society followed the system of hereditary posts, where one's profession was often determined by family background. His father was an official historian, his elder brother too, so Ban Zhao could only be assigned to assist his brother in the tedious task of copying documents. Though his heart was filled with passion and he longed to gallop across battlefields and expand the realm, reality trapped him day after day among stacks of scrolls. From a spirited youth he endured into middle age and then into his 40s, yet his life showed no improvement. Such flat, uneventful days gradually cast him into confusion. Was his entire life to be wasted in mediocrity, buried among piles of paperwork? At last, one day he could no longer bear the suffocating restraint. He slammed his brush down on the desk and cried out, "How can a true man remain trapped forever in ink and paper? I must, like Fu Jiezi and Zhang Qian, accomplish immortal feats. To become a marquis by defeating generals that is true worth. How could I resign myself to empty talk on paper?" These words drew laughter from those around him, who said he was nothing more than a dreamer, but Ban Zhao only smiled coldly. How could the mediocre understand the ambition of a hero, he thought. And it seemed fate heard his cry. Not long after, it quietly opened for him the gate to the battlefield. In the 12th month of the year 72, Eastern Han could no longer restrain itself. The court resolved to launch a counterattack against the northern Xiongnu, who for years had harassed the frontiers until the dynasty could endure no longer. The court appointed Dou Gu, a relative of the imperial family, as commander of the imperial chariot guard to lead a great army on campaign. When Ban Zhao heard this news, he made without hesitation the most important decision of his life. He threw aside the brush with composure. His family strongly opposed him. After all, as an official scribe in the Lantai archives, he held a secure and respectable post. He was already over 40, an age when one should enjoy peace and stability. Who would willingly abandon an iron rice bowl to risk his life on the frontier? But to Ban Zhao, it was mediocrity itself that was the true torment. He was weary of the routine that had bound him for 40 years. Even at 60 or 70, if given a single chance, he would still choose the battlefield. So he did not hesitate to resign, leave his home, and enlist in the army, setting out on the long-dreamed-of military path. When he arrived at Dou Gu's camp to report, the Dou family already had ties with the Ban family. Seeing Ban Chao's sincerity and talent, Dou Gu kept him close and employed him. Very soon, Ban Chao distinguished himself on the battlefield. In the second month of the following year, Han forces confronted the northern Xiongnu King Huyan in the Qilian Mountains. Ban Chao judged that the Xiongnu would certainly attempt a night raid, so he advised withdrawing the troops to lure the enemy into empty positions, then encircle them in counterattack. As expected, the Xiongnu did indeed launch a night attack, but they were disastrously defeated by the Han forces and returned en route. This battle made Dou Gu look at Ban Chao with new respect. He immediately appointed Ban Chao acting Sima and ordered him to lead a few thousand troops to attack an important stronghold of King Huyan. It was Ban Chao's first independent command. King Huyan had assumed his opponent was inexperienced and, feigning defeat, laid an ambush to lure the Han forces, but Ban Chao had already reconnoitered the ambush positions. Instead, he turned their stratagem against them. After deliberately entering the ambush, he counterattacked, severely crushing the Xiongnu main force and scattering the enemy. When Ban Chao returned in triumph, Dou Gu, during the awards and commendations, suddenly proposed an unexpected question. "I intend to send you as an envoy to the western region's kingdom of Shanshan to bring them into submission to the Great Han. Do you dare accept this mission?" The moment his words fell, the camp fell silent and everyone froze. The mission was extremely risky. No one expected Dou Gu to entrust such a high-risk diplomatic operation to Ban Chao, who had only just won glory in battle. The situation at the time was extremely complicated. Since Jiang Qian's contacts with the western regions, the Han court had once established ties with the various western states. But when pretenders usurped the throne and the Han fell into turmoil, contact with the western regions was severed for 60 years. The northern Xiongnu took the opportunity to intervene, and almost all the western states came under Xiongnu influence. Even so, Ban Chao accepted the task without hesitation. He had long dreamed that one day he might, like Jiang Qian, open new territories and win great achievements. Now the opportunity had come, and he agreed at once. When Dou Gu asked how many men he needed, Ban Chao replied that he would win them by virtue and that many men were not necessarily useful. Thus, he took only 36 soldiers and set out on the journey to the western regions. The kingdom of Shanshan lay at the junction of the northern and southern routes of the Tian Shan and was the throat through which one entered the western regions. In earlier years, the king of Shanshan had once voluntarily pledged allegiance to the Han, but when Emperor Guangwu ascended the throne, the central government was in turmoil and the court did not agree to the alliance. Shanshan had to rely on the northern Xiongnu. With Xiongnu backing it, even annexed several neighboring small states and grew stronger. When Ban Chao and his party arrived, they were initially received warmly, but the attitude of the princes and ministers quickly changed. Ban Chao keenly perceived that a Xiongnu envoy delegation had likely also arrived, so he gathered his men and said, "Once the Xiongnu arrive, the king of Shanshan will turn on us. If they really plan to move against us, we won't even be able to protect our bodies. What do you think we should do?" The soldiers answered in unison that they would obey the general's orders. Ban Chao's eyes flashed and he said, "If you do not enter the tiger's den, how will you get tiger cubs? Tonight we will strike first, we will night raid the Xiongnu delegation and leave none alive." At that time, the Xiongnu envoy party numbered over 130, while Ban Chao had only 36 men, but he showed no fear. That night, under a moonless sky, he led his troops silently into the Xiongnu camp, first eliminating the outer sentries, then setting fire and launching a surprise attack. Flames shot into the sky and the Xiongnu fled in panic. Ban Zhao had long prepared. Every fleeing man was cut down. The sounds of swords and cries of the dying filled the night, and the whole camp descended into hellish chaos. In the end, Ban Zhao's 36 men killed all the enemy and returned unscathed, while the more than 130 Xiongnu were all executed. The next morning, Ban Zhao ordered the heads of all the Xiongnu envoys to be neatly arranged and displayed before the king of Shanshan and his ministers. The scene stunned everyone. Many ministers collapsed to their knees and some even vomited on the spot. Seeing that the psychological effect had been achieved, Ban Zhao put away his killing intent and calmly said, "Those who bully the Great Han will ultimately pay the price. If your majesty is willing to submit to our court, the Great Han will not fail your goodwill." The king of Shanshan was terrified and understood that there was no turning back. He immediately declared his willingness to submit to the Eastern Han. Ban Zhao thus completed the mission successfully. Dou Gu was overjoyed and at once sent him on to Khotan to continue the work of re-establishing ties in the western regions. Ban Zhao again took only his 36 men and embarked on the new expedition. Upon reaching Khotan, he soon discovered that local governance relied heavily on diviners and their omens, and that these diviners were secretly colluding with the northern Xiongnu to the grave disadvantage of the Han. Ban Zhao decisively confronted the situation. He summoned the diviner to perform an omen and called together all local officials. As soon as the diviner entered, Ban Zhao drew his sword and beheaded him, then calmly told the assembly, "This diviner cannot even predict his own life or death. How can he possess divine powers? True divinity resides in the Son of Heaven of our great Han. If you believe in gods, you should submit to the Han." Seeing that the diviner's fate had been sealed, the people's resistance collapsed, and they all submitted to the Han court. Ban Zhao did not stop there. He next set his sights on the important western region node of Shul, which was the essential pass on the road to Pamirs and therefore of great strategic importance. At that time, the state of Shul had just been conquered by Kucha. The former king was killed, and the new ruler was Du Shi of Kucha. This man was brutal in his methods, and the people suffered bitterly. Ban Zhao resolved to eradicate the problem at its root. He sent Tianlu, under the guise of a Han envoy, to meet with Du Shi, seizing the chance to capture him. With thunderous speed, Ban Zhao brought Shulil under control, laying the foundation for stability in the western regions with this critical victory. Tianlu, highly skilled in martial arts and exceptional in ability, succeeded in capturing Du Shi. Ban Zhao, calm and composed, led Du Shi openly into the capital of Shule, Pishan. Along the way, the common people, seeing Du Shi in captivity, were overjoyed. The long-suppressed residents immediately rose in support, rebelling against the garrison troops left by Kucha. Deprived of their commander, the Kucha forces fell into chaos and were swiftly defeated. The people of Shul regarded Ban Zhao as a savior, moved to tears, and willingly pledged loyalty to Han, declaring their readiness to serve the dynasty. Thus, the three key strongholds of the southern route of the Tianshan, Shanshan, Khotan, and Shula all returned under Han authority. Other small states of the western regions also sent envoys one after another to submit. These continuous victories delighted Emperor Ming of Han, who in the year 74 issued an edict to restore the protectorate of the western regions. He appointed Chen Mu as protector and Guoshun as vice protector, stationed in Karasha to oversee and unify the management of the western states. With only 36 men, Ban Zhao had, in just 2 years, completed the task of restoring the western regions and reopening the strategic corridor. It was nothing short of a miracle. His military achievements were resounding, and he became the true hero of the western regions. Yet this legend was far from over. When the northern Xiongnu learned that Han forces had reasserted control over the western regions, they were enraged. They allied with Kucha, Karasha, and Aksu, among other anti-Han forces, plotting rebellion and vowing to drive Han power completely out of the western regions. Ban Chao was about to face battles even harsher and more perilous. In the spring of the year 75, the northern Xiongnu finally launched their counterattack. Shanshan, Kucha, Karasha, and Yuli, among other western states, betrayed Han and jointly attacked the protectorate of the western regions. Protector Chen Mu and Vice Protector Guo Shun fought desperately, but vastly outnumbered, they resisted until the front army was annihilated. Both ultimately perished in battle, dying with honor. The protectorate, once a symbol of Han authority, was overrun by the combined forces of these small states. With both protector and vice protector slain, this was a devastating blow to Han prestige. When Ban Chao received the grim news, grief and fury overwhelmed him. He swore vengeance for his fallen colleagues, yet the situation did not improve. The coalition of Kucha and Aksu quickly marched south, striking at Shulei where Ban Chao was stationed. He rushed to protect the people, stubbornly defending the city and repelling the invaders with great difficulty. Although he held the city, the situation remained precarious. Just as he prepared to reinforce the defenses, another heavy blow arrived: the death of Emperor Ming of Han. Political turmoil shook the court, and the new emperor, Emperor Zhang, had not yet firmly established his rule. The court had no time to attend to affairs in the western regions. Soon after, Ban Chao received an imperial order to withdraw from the western regions and return to Luoyang. This decision pained him deeply. He knew that if he left, years of effort would be destroyed. The hard-won achievements of Han would fall again into Xiongnu hands. Yet if he defied the command, death awaited him. Beset by internal and external crises, Ban Chao had no choice but to temporarily obey. He began preparing to depart east. The news spread quickly. The people of Shul were heartbroken, rushing to bid him farewell, their cries echoing along the roads. At one point, an officer even drew his sword and killed himself in protest. Ban Chao's heart was torn apart. The trust of the people, the sacrifices of his soldiers, each detail pierced him like a blade. When he reached Khotan, the people were already kneeling along the roadsides, weeping and shouting, "Han must not abandon us." Those cries struck him like sharp swords. He remembered his promise that Han would always be their strongest support. If he abandoned them now, it would be treachery. How could he face the spirits of those who had bled and died for Han? At that moment, Ban Chao finally made his decision. He stopped, turned back to gaze toward the western regions, and resolved that a man's ambition belonged at the frontier to sweep away the Xiongnu, never to return home until the task was done. He boldly reversed course, risking the charge of disobedience, and returned alone to Shul, once again raising the banner of Han in defense of the western regions. At that time, the coalition of Kucha and Aksu had not yet withdrawn, and unrest within Shulei worsened. Two city defense officers took advantage of the chaos to rebel, intending to defect to the enemy. Ban Chao decisively suppressed the internal rebellion and quickly pacified the insurgents. Seizing the moment before the enemy had firmly established their footing, he launched a proactive assault that shattered the vanguard of the allied army and forced them to retreat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he united the people of Khotan with Kanju and several other states to form a coalition force, marched north, and captured Aksu, severely weakening the power of Kucha. The situation finally stabilized. Until the year 83, Ban Chao continued to hold the western regions, tirelessly working to consolidate Han rule. He wrote reports to Emperor Zhang of Han, giving detailed accounts of the western region's situation. The emperor, seeing his loyalty and resolve, not only forgave him for acting beyond orders, but also promoted him to chief scribe of the western regions, giving him full command over military and political affairs there. However, at that time, the interior of the empire was suffering from severe drought, and the court itself was struggling to survive, unable to provide Ban Chao with effective support. Even so, Ban Chao did not retreat in the slightest, but continued to hold the defensive line of the entire western regions on his own. The political situation in the western regions was extremely complicated. Along the southern route, Shulei, Khotan, and Shanshan remained firm supporters of Ban Chao, while along the northern route, Kucha, Karasha, and Turfan was still under Xiongnu control and could rebel at any time. Farther north, Wusun remained ambiguous, unwilling to take a clear stance. In the northwest, however, the Kushans and Kangju both openly expressed their full support for Ban Chao and the Han court. Surviving in this gap, fighting hard while isolated and unsupported, Ban Chao alone upheld the Han banner across the western regions. Confronting the tangled situation, Ban Chao formulated a decisive strategy. He knew that relying solely on Han military power would not suffice to suppress all sides in the long run. Instead, he cleverly exploited the rivalries between the states, stirring up internal conflicts and making hostile forces fight each other, thereby weakening the enemy and lightening the Han burden. Under his coordination, the states of the southern route formed a strong alliance, united in resisting the northern powers. These states had originally been weak and often suffered oppression from the northern powers, and Ban Chao seized this point to rally them into a force capable of resisting foreign threats. Toward the northern state of Wusun, Ban Chao remained cautious. Though Wusun had long maintained independence, he understood that if an alliance could be formed, it would check Kucha and other hostile states. Thus he sent envoys carrying fine Han silks to Wusun, engaging in close diplomacy with their royal clan. In the end, he successfully secured an alliance between Wusun and the Han, and the situation began to turn in Han's favor. But the respite was brief. The Kucha state, which Ban Chao had long kept under watch, began to stir. They took advantage of mounting resentment against Ban Chao in Yarkand and sent envoys to sow discord. Tempted by lavish treasures, the king of Yarkand finally chose to betray the Han. Worse still, Yarkand secretly dispatched agents to Shul, bribing the king who had once been loyal to Ban Chao into rebellion. This betrayal ignited the conflict. Yarkand then openly revolted, joining hands with Kucha to launch an attack on Ban Chao. He quickly rallied the people of Shul to resist, but soon found himself in a perilous situation, besieged from three sides. Just as the crisis worsened, Kangju, previously supportive, suddenly turned and joined the assault. This development greatly increased the pressure on Ban Chao. Unlike Kucha and Yarkand, Kangju possessed far stronger cavalry, and their entry into the war threatened to break the balance entirely. As expected, allies like Wusun and Shanshan, seeing the shift, declared neutrality one after another, leaving Ban Chao completely isolated. Facing overwhelming enemies and abandoned by allies, Ban Chao did not panic. He calmly analyzed the deeper reasons behind Kangju's sudden intervention. He judged that Kangju did not truly wish to oppose the Han, but rather sought to expand its influence amid the western region's chaos, fearing that a neighboring state's rise might threaten it. Kangju's move was nothing more than a strategy of borrowing strength to prepare for future struggles with the Kushans. Understanding this, Ban Chao immediately dispatched envoys to the Kushans, skillfully exposing Kangju's ambitions in persuasive terms. Along with the message, he presented the Kushans' king with the most exquisite Han brocades, which he greatly favored. The Kushans' king, impressed by Ban Chao's sincerity in the gift, decided to intervene and sent a letter demanding that Kangju withdraw at once. Kangju, unwilling to defy Kushan's pressure, was forced to pull out of the conflict and ceased attacking Shul. The situation suddenly reversed. Ban Chao launched a counteroffensive, crushed the Yarkand rebellion, installed a new king to stabilize the throne, and then engaged the allied armies of Kucha and Yarkand in decisive battle. He won a resounding victory, thoroughly smashing the enemy's plot of encirclement. The western regions once again returned to stability. Yet after the flames of war died down, Ban Chao now faced the question, how would he deal with Yarkand, who had only just betrayed him and been subdued? Would he show mercy, or would he exact a reckoning for their treachery?